good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, or whenever you are tuning into this Fusion Super Collider. Thank you for joining us. Today will be a different type of Super Collider. We're not just going to look at a passage from our reading plan, although we will put those over here for a moment just so you can see what verses there are for beginning Thursday and then going into the next 10 days. But today we're going to look at a word. We're going to do a little word study as we move into the season of Lent. Now, Lent is something that begins on February 17th, so today when we're recording this, and it will end April 3rd. It's a time of observance where we as Christians prepare our hearts and our minds for Easter. Now, one of the key components of the Lenten season is fasting. And for our Fusion students and others tuning in, I want to give you a quick but still thorough understanding of what true fasting is. And we also look forward to this weekend upcoming, where Pastor John is going to share a lot more about what it means to truly fast. But I want you to just understand the word with me briefly, and then I will read a passage that tells us a little bit of the best example of what fasting looks like. So the word fasting in the ancient Hebrew context is Tsoom. Tsoom. And that means to fast. And a lot of people would know the idea of fasting as giving up mostly food for a certain period of time or an extended period of time or a certain type of food in order to focus on the thing that they're missing and replace that with a sense of who God is. They try to take away so that they can experience something else. And so that is a good angle of what fasting is. I've seen a lot of history behind fasting in youth groups and circles like that before, though. And you see things like there's 30-hour famine, there's all sorts of these little projects that are done, and I think some of those miss the point a little bit, because most of the time you have a bunch of students who are just skipping a couple meals, and then they go to a pizza party afterward, and they miss the entire point of what fasting is. But here's something very cool. The word Tsoom is used in that ancient Hebrew context, and it doesn't just mean to fast like I gave up food. The most direct translation of it means I have covered my mouth. And I love that imagery. If you can imagine covering up your mouth. I think of this when maybe I'm struggling and I'm arguing with my kids and they're not listening to me and I'm trying to give them good instructions. A lot of times they'll talk through things and they'll just keep going on the things that they want to discuss and they won't listen to me. And so very deeply, I wish that they understood the ancient art of fasting, because it would be great for them to just be able to cover their mouths and listen. And so fasting has two critical parts that we're looking at just in the word. Fasting doesn't just mean I gave up food. Fasting also means I covered my mouth so that nothing's coming out, but what is important is what's coming in. And so when you're fasting, if you have parents that are walking you through Lent practices or things like that, just remember fasting isn't just about you skipping a meal or doing a little bit of extra something here or there, but it has a lot to do with listening to what God would say, focusing and meditating on His Word. Now for one last aspect, I'm going to quickly read 12 verses from Isaiah chapter 58. I'm going to begin in verse 1 and read all the way to verse 12. And this is going to give us another idea of how important it is that our hearts are in the right place while we fast. It says this: "Cry aloud, do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people of their transgression, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the judgment of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why have we fasted and you see it not? Why have we humbled ourselves and you take no knowledge of it? They're upset. Why isn't God paying attention to our fasting? But he says this in verse 3, behold, in the day of your fast, you seek your own pleasure, and you oppress all your workers. Behold, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to hit with a wicked fist. Fasting like yours this day will not make your voice be heard on high. And such the fast that I choose, a day for a person to humble himself. It is to bow down his head like a reed and spread sackcloth and ashes under him. Will you call this a fast and a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the fast I choose, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, to bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them, and to not hide yourself from your own flesh or family? Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up speedily. Your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. And you shall cry, and he will say, here I am. If you take away the yoke from your midst, the pointing of the finger and the speaking of wickedness, if you pour yourself out for the hungry and satisfy the desire of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom will be as the noonday. And the Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your desire in scorched places and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose water do not fail. And your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. This is the word of the Lord. So young brothers and sisters, I would encourage you this season. Fasting is not about just skipping a couple meals and thinking a little bit more about God. Fasting is a little bit of skipping meals and thinking a little bit more about God. It's also covering your mouth and listening for what he would have to teach you in his word. And also, as we heard in that verse, to do what is right and righteous and good, loving our neighbor, spending time with our family, feeding the poor, giving refuge to the homeless. There's a lot of incredible things found there in Isaiah chapter 58. And I hope that as you move into this time of Lent, that you would worship the Lord in this special way called fasting. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you later.